You won't believe what happened when a disabled girl was thrown into a pool by a powerful HOA president, and she had no idea who her victim's father really was. Before we dive into today's story, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so we can keep bringing you amazing stories like this one. I never thought I'd leave the city. I spent most of my adult life in downtown courtrooms, crossing swords with defense attorneys and building cases that made headlines. My name carries weight in legal circles, a fact I've learned to keep quiet when I'm off the clock. After my wife passed, I realized the high-rises and endless traffic noise were no place to raise Emily, my daughter. She was only 10 when the accident happened, the same one that took her mother. I still remember the sirens, the blood, the way her small voice whispered, "Daddy," from the back seat as I tried to hold everything together. Doctors said we were lucky she survived, but luck didn't mean she walked away unscathed. Her spinal cord had been damaged, and she would never walk again. From that day on, she needed a wheelchair, physical therapy, and more emotional strength than any child should ever be asked to muster. And she did. Emily is a fighter, brave, witty, and somehow still full of light. We needed a fresh start, someplace quiet. That's how we ended up in a manicured suburb 30 minutes from the capital, tucked into a community of pastel-colored homes with American flags and immaculate lawns. It looked like something on a postcard. But like most postcards, the beauty was only surface deep. From the moment we moved into Briarwood Estates, I knew the Homeowners Association ran things tight. I received the welcome packet before I'd even unpacked. 42 pages of rules and bylaws about where your trash bins could go, what shades of beige were acceptable for porch furniture, and when grass must be mowed. I read through it with the casual detachment of a man who's argued constitutional law in front of state judges. None of it bothered me. I wasn't there to make waves. I just wanted peace. I wanted Emily to have a backyard, fresh air, a good school, and a clean break. For a while, it seemed like we might actually get that. Emily adjusted better than I expected. She loved the openness, the birds, and especially the community pool. She couldn't swim like she used to, but she liked dipping her feet in the shallow end and listening to the water. I'd sit beside her and read case files on my tablet while she laughed at videos on her phone or sketched little comics in her journal. We'd found something resembling normalcy. Then came Karen. Her real name was Cheryl, but everyone called her Karen behind her back, even the other HOA members. She was a 50-something woman with ironed khakis, an ever-present pair of oversized sunglasses, and the uncanny ability to appear wherever something wasn't up to code. From our very first meeting, I knew she didn't like us. Maybe it was the way she looked down at Emily's wheelchair, like it was an unsightly object ruining her view. Maybe it was the faux sweetness she layered over every insult, like when she said, "It's so brave of you to take her out in public," or, "I hope the neighbors don't mind those tire tracks on the lawn." Little accidents happen, don't they? I bit my tongue. Every time, I reminded myself, this is not court. This is just a woman with too much time and a clipboard. But she kept escalating. Within the first month, we received 5 violation notices. One for a non-regulation garden gnome, another for having our trash bin out 30 minutes too early, and 2 for noise disturbances during the day. Emily's laughter, apparently, echoed. The 5th was about the wheelchair ramp I had installed on our porch. It clashed with the aesthetic of the neighborhood, she claimed. I didn't even dignify that one with a response. I knew the law. The ADA was on our side, and I made sure to file every permit correctly. But Karen wasn't used to being ignored, and she had a smile that said she wasn't finished. One Saturday, I had a Zoom call with a judge regarding a high-profile corruption case I was prosecuting. Emily had begged to go to the pool. She knew the rules: stay in the shallow end, keep her phone near, don't engage with Karen or anyone who seemed hostile. I figured it would be okay. We'd been to that pool dozens of times. I left the sliding door cracked open and checked on her every 10 minutes. This time, 10 minutes was too long. I heard screaming. My name, Emily's name, someone yelling, "She's in the water." My heart froze. I bolted through the house and sprinted barefoot across the patio. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. Emily was flailing in the pool, her arms trying to tread water she hadn't prepared to enter. Her wheelchair had been shoved to the side. On its side, wheels spinning uselessly. Without thinking, I dove in. The water was cold, but adrenaline drowned out the shock. I reached her, pulled her up, held her tightly as she sobbed against me. She coughed up water, clinging to my shirt like it was a lifeline. And then I saw her. Karen, standing poolside, arms crossed, not a drop of panic on her face. She was blocking the edge, she said, like it was an explanation. Kids can't play when that thing is in the way. I stared at her, stunned, shivering, rage rising like fire in my throat. I asked her if she'd pushed Emily. She rolled her eyes. She was too close. I just gave the chair a little nudge. How was I supposed to know she couldn't swim? Other parents were gathering now. One had filmed it. Another was calling the police. Karen tried to walk away. I told her not to move. My voice was low, icy calm, the kind I used when interrogating murder suspects. She froze. Emily was trembling in my arms. The pool deck was chaos. But in my mind, everything was suddenly clear. This wasn't just bullying. This wasn't just a woman drunk on HOA power. This was assault, endangerment, a blatant act of ableist cruelty. And I would not let it go unpunished. Karen had no idea who she had just laid hands on, because the man holding the soaked, traumatized little girl in his arms wasn't just some suburban dad with a ramp and a gnome. I was the general prosecutor for the state, and this was about to become the biggest case of Karen's life. Karen didn't say a word when the police arrived, at least not at first. Her smug attitude melted the second she saw the flashing lights reflect off the water surface. Emily was still wrapped in a towel, shaking, while I gave my statement to the responding officer. I wasn't angry in the way most people understand anger. I was clinical, focused. I'd spent my career preparing case files, gathering testimony, and dismantling liars in courtrooms, but I had never imagined doing it for my own daughter. Karen started talking when they told her she might need to come down to the station. "You're kidding me," she barked. "This is harassment. I'm the president of this community. I have rights. He's just trying to cause trouble." The officer was surprisingly professional, even kind. "Ma'am, you pushed a child in a wheelchair into a swimming pool. We have multiple eyewitnesses and video evidence. You're being detained for questioning. Please come with us." Her tone flipped like a switch. Wait, I didn't push her. I nudged the wheelchair. I didn't know she couldn't swim. I stepped forward, calm and collected, holding my badge in my hand. "That's something you can tell the judge, Karen." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You're a cop?" "I'm the general prosecutor of this state," I said, voice low. "And you just assaulted my daughter. You made this personal." The silence that followed was electric. Karen looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her brain was clearly trying to do the math, to reconcile the suburban dad she'd mocked and harassed with the man who held the authority to bring felony charges to court. By the time the police car pulled away with her in the back seat, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered. Some were filming. Others were whispering. The ones who had stood by her all this time were suddenly nowhere to be found. Back inside, I dried Emily's hair while she sobbed softly into my chest. She kept asking if she had done something wrong, if she shouldn't have gone to the pool alone. "You did nothing wrong," I whispered. "She did. And I promise you, baby girl, she's not getting away with it." That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up reviewing the footage from the bystander who'd filmed the whole thing. It showed Karen marching across the pool deck, yelling about liabilities and safety regulations, before gripping Emily's wheelchair and yanking it toward the side. It looked like Emily tried to stop her, her hand reaching for the wheel, but Karen ripped it free, tilted it back, and let it fall. Then she walked off like she'd just taken out the trash. The next morning, I contacted my office, not as a prosecutor, but as a father. I recused myself from direct involvement in the case to avoid any conflict of interest. Instead, I handed everything to my trusted deputy, a bulldog of a litigator named Erica Tran, and told her to go for the throat. "I want every statute, every charge, every possible count," I said. "Assault of a disabled minor, endangerment, reckless conduct, hate crime enhancement. It's a long list," Erica said, her voice like steel. "She's going to wish she stuck to citing lawn flamingos." The story broke within 24 hours. Someone from the neighborhood had leaked the footage to a local news station, and from there it went viral. HOA president pushes disabled girl in a pool was plastered across every news feed. Twitter/X exploded. Karen's full name, her picture, even her HOA meeting minutes. All of it hit the internet like a freight train. Some folks tried to defend her, claiming it was a misunderstanding that she didn't know Emily was disabled despite the obvious. But most people saw the truth for what it was: cruelty, plain and simple. Karen's Facebook page was flooded with angry comments. Her employers issued a statement claiming she was no longer affiliated with them. Sponsors pulled out of whatever small-town business she ran from her garage. And Briarwood Estates? Oh, they panicked. The HOA board held an emergency session, publicly stripped her of her presidency, and issued a groveling apology. They tried to offer me money. Hush funds, settlements, goodwill gestures. I refused everyone. This wasn't about money. This was about accountability. Meanwhile, Emily became a symbol. People from all over sent letters. Kids in wheelchairs, parents, teachers, strangers, offering support. Someone made fan art of her with a cape. She smiled again, slowly, timidly. But I knew the trauma still lingered. The nightmares came some nights. She'd cry out in her sleep, flinching at the sound of splashing water. Karen was arraigned a week later. She tried to dress the part, pearls, conservative blazer, like the Karen she was. She pled not guilty, of course, but the court wasn't buying it. The judge set bail high, citing her behavior and the public backlash. She made it out, but barely. During the pre-trial hearings, her attorney, a thin, oily man who clearly didn't want the case, tried to frame her as concern for the safety of other children. I watched from the back row as Erica dismantled him, showed the video, played the audio of Emily's terrified screams, brought in the witnesses, including a young mom who tried to stop Karen and was told to mind her own business. Karen's expression shifted more with each passing day, from indignation to fear to full-on desperation. I almost pitied her. Almost. It didn't take long for the plea deal to land on the table. 2 years probation, mandatory community service with a disability advocacy group, public apology, and therapy. But Erica pushed back. She traumatized a child, she said. Probation isn't enough. We wanted jail time. Not years, but something that would stain her record. Show others that you don't just get to hurt people and walk away clean because you have a clipboard and a God complex. The judge agreed. Karen was sentenced to 90 days in county jail, followed by a year of house arrest and mandatory diversity and disability education. She cried in the courtroom. I didn't. Emily didn't. We just watched her be let out in cuffs. It wasn't vengeance. It was justice. Real, clean, legal justice. After that, life started to calm down. Reporters eventually stopped calling. HOA meetings became surprisingly civil. Neighbors who once avoided us brought cookies and apologies. Emily made a new friend down the street, a girl who used hearing aids and thought Emily's wheelchair was super cool. One afternoon, Emily asked if she could go back to the pool. I hesitated but nodded. We went together, just the two of us. She sat by the edge again, feet in the water, sketchbook in her lap. I watched her smile as if a weight had been lifted. We survived the storm. And Karen? She'll think twice the next time she tries to bully someone weaker. Because in this neighborhood, justice lives right next door. The weeks that followed the trial were a blur of mundane normalcy, something I hadn't realized I'd been craving until it started settling back into our lives. Emily returned to school, albeit with a few extra nervous glances as she rolled through the hallways in her wheelchair, but there were no more whispered insults, no more glares from parents or kids who didn't understand. The world hadn't suddenly become a utopia, but it had shifted. It was quieter now, gentler. The hardest part wasn't the legal battles. It wasn't even the haunting moments when Emily woke up from nightmares and clung to me, gasping for air. The hardest part was learning to let go of the anger that had consumed me during the whole ordeal. When Karen had thrown Emily into the pool, it wasn't just a violation of my daughter. It was a direct attack on everything I stood for as a man, as a father, and as a prosecutor. It felt personal in a way I didn't know how to process at first. But as the dust settled, I realized that the best revenge wasn't in punishment, but in healing. And healing came slowly. Emily's laugh returned after a few weeks, quieter at first, then louder, like it had been waiting for the moment to burst free again. She began drawing comics again, though the sketches were no longer of superheroes battling villains. Now, they were of normal kids, kids who helped each other, who looked out for one another. She'd show me her drawings with a proud smile, always asking for feedback on how to improve them. One afternoon, she rolled up to me after school, holding up her sketchbook, excited. "Dad, look," she exclaimed. "I made a new superhero. Her name is Wheelie Woman. She has super strength and can fly with her wheelchair." I felt my chest tighten, a lump forming in my throat. That moment, her pride in herself, the resilience I'd seen since the day of the accident, it was the moment I knew Emily was going to be okay. We were going to be okay. The neighborhood, too, had slowly started to change. When the news about Karen's trial had first broken, there had been whispers. Some had been quick to distance themselves from her, but others had defended her, citing her years of community service and how we all make mistakes. Those who had been so silent during the whole ordeal were now louder than ever, apologizing to us, telling us how they'd been wrong for not stepping in earlier. At first, I didn't know how to handle the flood of well-wishers. There were flowers at our doorstep, handwritten cards, and homemade casseroles sent by neighbors who had kept their distance before. But then, one day, one of the neighbors I'd always liked, someone who had been kind to Emily from the start, knocked on my door. Mrs. Dalrymple was a retired teacher who'd lived in Briarwood Estates for over 30 years, and she'd always been the type of neighbor who kept to herself. She handed me a box of cookies, still warm, and looked me straight in the eye. "I've known Karen for a long time," she said quietly, "and I failed you both when I didn't speak up. I'm sorry. That woman, she's nothing but trouble, and she's hurt a lot of people over the years. I should have told someone." She paused, eyes welling up. "But you know, it's easy to turn a blind eye when it's not your kid in the pool." I didn't understand. Not until now. I took the cookies, not because I was hungry, but because in that moment, I realized something important. Mrs. Dalrymple was doing something I had waited for. She was taking responsibility. She wasn't making excuses. She was admitting her failure, owning it, and learning from it. That was all I could ever ask for. "Thank you," I said, choking back my own emotion. "We're all just trying to do better. You didn't hurt us, but we're glad you see it now." Over time, more people came forward with their own apologies. One by one, they began to understand. The invisible walls between us all started crumbling, and a new sense of community began to form. I still wasn't naive enough to think that everything was suddenly perfect, but I'd seen the beginnings of change. Emily's presence in the neighborhood, her quiet resilience, had taught us all a powerful lesson. The HOA, for its part, had learned its lesson the hard way. After Karen's resignation, the board was forced to hold a series of meetings about inclusivity, diversity, and accessible design. They voted to implement new guidelines that would make it easier for people with disabilities to live there without fear of judgment or harassment. Emily became a local hero of sorts, not in the way a superhero might, but in the way that people with integrity and compassion often do, quietly, steadily, without fanfare. She was invited to speak at local town halls, to share her story, and to offer advice about how communities could do better to serve people like her. But Emily never sought that kind of attention. She didn't care about the accolades or the spotlight. What she cared about was being seen, not as someone broken, not as someone needing pity, but as someone who had her own strengths, her own abilities. She began to take more initiative at school, joining clubs, speaking up in class, and even running for student council. She'd come so far since the incident, it felt like she was a different person, stronger, more confident. In the evenings after dinner, Emily and I would sit on the porch together, watching the neighborhood go by. Sometimes she'd sketch, other times she'd ask about my work. As she got older, she became more curious about the law, why people break it, and why others fight for justice. I talked to her about my cases, about the balance of power, the complexities of the law, and how it's never black and white. "Dad, do you think there's ever a point when someone can't be fixed?" she asked one night, her face thoughtful. Like Karen, do you think she could be a better person if she tried? I paused, thinking. I think anyone can change, I said, but they have to want it. And sometimes, the only way to make someone understand is to hold them accountable for their actions. You can't fix people who don't admit they've done something wrong. I glanced over at her, smiling softly. But I do think the right people, like you, can change a community. Her eyes sparkled with understanding. She didn't need me to tell her that. She'd already been doing it. As the years passed, Briarwood Estates became a place where no one took things for granted. People started checking on each other more. They talked more openly about accessibility, about mental health, about respect. No one forgot the lesson that had come so painfully, so publicly. Karen, by all accounts, never fully recovered from a scandal. She tried to rebuild her life in another town, but it wasn't the same. The damage to her reputation was irreparable, and most people in Briarwood who had once defended her now distanced themselves. The community had learned to look out for one another, to never allow someone like her to rise to power again. It wasn't revenge, it was justice, plain and simple. But in the end, it wasn't about Karen at all. It was about Emily. It was about the courage she had shown in the face of terror, the way she rose from the depths of that pool and refused to let anyone define her. She was more than just the girl who was pushed into a pool. She was a reminder that sometimes people need to be forced to see what they're capable of, and that, together, a community can heal.